I made another surprise connection with that neighborhood in St. Louis that I did a previous video on. So if you haven't seen that, I'll have that linked in the description. So it all started with a death certificate when I was researching for this video. So, of course, the names immediately jumped out at me. Angela Finazzo, and that her parents were Vincenzo Palazzolo, and this is the big one, Patrina Randazzo. I'm actually a Randazzo, so that gets my attention. The husband is Jim Finazzo. So it turns out that Jim, when you see Jim and it's a Sicilian or an Italian, especially if they're Sicilian, that is usually a nickname for Vincenzo. So that, from what I've understood, it goes from Jens is is what they would call Vincenzo Genzo, and so Jens became James. It was a very sad way that she had died of cancer. The names got me, so I said I gotta see if they're from Terracini, but they may be connected. And they were not initially on my tree, but as I'll go through, I was able to find them on my tree. That is actually Angela there with her husband Vincenzo. It's real interesting because he was actually honored when he passed away. He was over 100 years old, so he lived for another 20-something years after Angela had passed away. And it talks about how he got a job. When he came to the United States in 1901 to find work, he got a job as a blacksmith with the railroads and sent the money he saved from the job back to Sicily so his brothers could come to the United States. So they did honor him, and that the flag was at half staff in the town when he passed away in Woodson Terrace in Missouri. So it turns out that Vincenzo was actually born in Genesee, like a lot of other people in that particular neighborhood in St. Louis, the Hill. A lot of, mainly Genesee, but there was also Terracini thrown in there. I am pretty certain that I have the pictures of the right people here. Not so certain that with his mother and father, but I was able to get pretty far back. So the Genesee records were very lucky. A lot of the Sicilian records, especially in Palermo province, Carini is off the chart. I mean, it's fantastic going back to the early 1500s. Genesee, not as far back, but the records are really, really good. So I was able to get pretty far back on both of these lines, and I have a lot of the documents. The direct Finazzo line goes back to a Gaetano Finazzo who was actually born in Carini. So there was a connection. And so that's how I have them on my that's one of the ways I have them on my tree. So I already had Michael, we'll just say Michael Finazzo. I already had him on my tree, so that's how I was able to connect this direct Finazzo line. But if you remember, we've got Pietra Randazzo, and that is what I was able to initially connect to my tree. So yeah, it's pretty far. I get it. It's pretty far back, but this is the first connection I was able to make. But that's the first connection I was able to make from the Angela Palazzolo on this death certificate. So I know it goes far back, but it does connect, and that's how I got them on my particular tree. Gaspar Randazzo, who was born in Carini and passed away. I guess he may have gotten married in Carini and moved to Genesee. But I actually have the 1814 marriage record for Giuseppe Finazzo, which is really cool. So like I said, the records for Genesee are fantastic. So this is the marriage record right there, and that's how I was able to get the parents. And then, like I mentioned, that's how I was able to get the parents and been able to connect to the rest of my tree. But I was able to get Angela's baptism record from Genesee. You can see the record is pretty easy to read, very clear. They're not all that clear, but this one is pretty good. What's also really cool is that while I was going through the records, now mia nonna, her name is Caterina Gargaiano, and so the name Gargaiano always stands out to me. I mean, even in some of the worst records, if there's a Gargaiano on that record, I'm going to see it. So I saw this, obviously stood out, 24 February 1811 in Genesee. Now, mia familia from Carini, so I was kind of unexpected to see a Gargaiano in Genesee. So it turns out I already had him on my tree. So I already had him there. But as you can see here, I didn't know his wife's name because I also had birth certificates with his children, but I didn't have his wife's name. So now I actually do. So now I can go and I can fit that in. But see, and this is all information that I was able to find and make these connections because I recognize the names. Because as I mentioned in the last video, so if you pay attention to the names of that particular city, you'll recognize them when they've immigrated, in this case, to St. Louis. I was able to find something else, though. So I found, so this is what I'm talking about. It's a 1920 census from Manhattan. So you can see it's Manhattan, 1920. Look at these names. Now, we got Misaraka, Vitali. Vitali is one of the most common names in Genesee. Also very common in Carini. Then we have Badalamenti, which is one of the most common names in Carini. Palazzolo, Vitali, Galati. I have a 2 times great grandmother, Angela Galati. And we have Finazzo and Menino. So here in this particular neighborhood in Manhattan, you can see that more than half of this census record are all names that are common to Carini, Terracini, and Genesee. So in the next video, I'll be working on this and seeing where they are from. And I am betting it's definitely going to be a mix, Carini, Terracini, and Genesee.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.